Hello, hello, everyone. I'm Sarah Christine, and today I'm thrilled that we are joined by Charissa Marciniak, founder and owner of Right Relations. She's also a dear friend of mine, and I am super excited about this conversation. Hello, Charissa. Hello. I'm so glad you're here.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here as well.
Oh, so you're so welcome. Oh my goodness. Well, before we dive in, I'd love to do a quick 411 for our listeners, just about you and your business. So I pulled together a little quick overview of Carissa. Carissa, let me know. I'm sure we'll get into it. But I know you've led successful marketing campaigns at both for-profit and nonprofit organizations, such as the Prominence Art Organization's COCA, Center for Creative Arts, and the Bach Society of St. Louis, just to name a few. And you are one of the most well-rounded marketing professionals that I know. And you see challenges from all different sides. You know, the importance of branding, the impact of campaigns, the unique style of various transactions, to even the financial goals of bringing all those components together. You know, to create cohesive marketing ecosystems for brands and organizations. And Chris, really kick us off during your time. I know you and I have had some discussions, but during your time working for these organizations, I would say that you've had an aha moment. Would you call it that? If so, I feel like, before you started the right relations, what was that for you?
Yeah, for sure. There was actually a few. It wasn't just one. I know some people are like, yes, this is when it happened, and I knew I needed to start this business, or I knew that entrepreneurship was for me. It was a longer phase for me, for sure. So I was working at a job in the nonprofit sector, and so I was in charge of marketing for a finance firm. So I'd been instructed by my previous boss when I was in the nonprofit sector to leave the nonprofit sector to get a little bit more pay. So I had hit my ceiling, and my boss knew that. And as much as she loved having me work for her, she knew that I was not going to be able to make more money and really get the pay that I deserved in the nonprofit sector. So she told me to leave, go into the profit sector, and so I did. And when I did that, I actually started at the same time. So I started doing some freelance work for another organization that I had was involved with. And so that organization had reached out to me about doing some freelance work for them as their one man marketing team. And so I actually signed on the dotted line for the freelance gig one day. The next day, I started my finance marketing profit job. And so for about a year and a half, I worked as a freelancer on the side. So I would do it on nights and weekends, moonlighting, before moonlighting was really that cool. So this is all pre-pandemic. And so once I got in there, and on the weekends and in the evenings, once I got into the backside of this organization, I realized just how much support they've been needing. They had been being overcharged for a lot of their media buys. So I was able to come in and help them actually start paying what they needed to be paying, what a proper rate was. And so there was a little bit of a learning curve there for them, not realizing that they could have been asking for less money, but also it's not their bailiwick. So why would we expect that they would know to ask for less, right? And so ask for less
Right,
or more for less money.
right,
And
exactly.
so yeah, so throughout that whole year, I was able to renegotiate their existing advertising budget. I created a marketing plan for them, and then really was able to bring in some like creative energy to help them elevate their brand and highlight their mission. So I was able to do a lot of that. And that to me was a big aha moment. So the first one kind of happened when I was chatting with my boss, who was like, "Leave, go to the the profit sector." And so if you need to make a little bit more money, and then come back into the nonprofit sector. So I always intended to come back to nonprofits and to working with them, because that's really where my passion is. But there was that first part, and then the second part was definitely once I started working with them as a freelancer. So realized there was a huge need for that. Other organizations started reaching out to me, and I quit my finance gig in the middle of the pandemic and went full time.
Wow. I know, right? With like, talk about taking a drink from a fire hydrant, doing something that is
Oh
completely
my
crazy.
gosh.
At the same time, kudos to you though, because I feel like that's where so many people I think have similar challenges, right? Where they have an aha moment, they see a gap, they see a discrepancy, something that they could
Yeah.
fill. Like you were saying, there's a discrepancy in the nonprofits where marketing and, it's not, like you said, it's not their gig. Their gig in the nonprofit is really to do their purpose, their mission. And yet
Totally.
everything else counts, right? And marketing is so important to that. I know, not just marketing and funding as well, but like marketing seems to kind of be every dollar counts, right? So when you start to
Yes.
see that and you're like, it's not a one-to-one for profits versus non-for-profits when it comes to how they think about money. And, a lot of people, again, have those aha moments back to your business, and then they, maybe they're terrified to make that leap. And I got to tell you, like, you made that leap during a very terrifying time for all of us.
Oh my gosh.
No one's going to say that that wasn't something, that was one of the turning points that we're going to be able to look back on, right? Everything
Mm.
changed with 2020. And
Oh
so,
yeah.
for you taking that leap during all of that change, what was that like for you starting that business, getting those things off the ground? I know you've
Yeah.
moved, like, I know there was all those other things. I mean,
Oh
there
yeah.
were kind of a lot of things moving around your ecosystem and at the time, and being able to balance that and also bring right relations to life, right? Because
Hmm.
I really hear you with your passion and saying, some people kind of wait. It's like the right time is now, and especially when you know where your passion is. So, talk to us a little bit about that, Charissa. Like, I know, like, it was it was really a crazy time, but like, walk us through what you were feeling, what you were thinking. What was that like? It's only been a couple years, but
Yeah,
it's, it was so poignant.
for sure. A lot happens in 3 years, which still blows my mind that it's already been 3 years since I started Right Relations. So I am happy about that for sure, obviously.
Kudos to
But
you.
yeah, thank you. Looking back 3 years ago, I was scared. Obviously, that's kind of the first emotion any, you know, person would feel quitting their consistent, stable job in the middle of a global pandemic. And so I left not so some people who say I started a job in the middle of the pandemic, or I started a company, or whatever the change may have been. So it wasn't late pandemic, this was early on. So I had been freelancing 2019 into 2020, and so before COVID hit and the pandemic started, I was already thinking through, okay, what's my long game? How long am I going to stay in the finance world? I knew profit marketing wasn't for me. I'm a very passion driven person. And so that is really what pushes me to make a lot of my decisions. So if anybody knows anything about me, they know that if I'm not able to help a client work through something in a really positive way and help them to continue to pursue their passions, then it's just not going to work. And so that's where profit was just, I kind of realized, not really what I wanted to be doing, pushing, financial products and helping run a marketing run the marketing department for a finance firm. And so but yeah, it was scary. It was very scary to leave that consistency and the consistent paycheck and jump into the unknown of entrepreneurship, especially when funding was being cut left and right. So, my specialization is in the arts world. So, performing arts organizations are really the focus that Right Relations works with. And so, unfortunately, as we all know, during COVID, what was the first thing to go? When we talk about absolutely necessary to keep people alive, well, you don't need a performance to keep someone alive, right? So healthcare professionals,
Exactly.
emergency services, and those were what were prioritized in that point in time. But we looked to those artists to keep us sane, right? So while
Exactly.
the doctors and the nurses were keeping people alive and are definitely the heroes of the pandemic, um, across the board, when we look to like
Absolutely.
the social side of it, helping us stay sane, it was definitely the musicians and the artists continuing to create, to provide a lot of that comfort. And so that being said, a
Yeah.
lot of, so the one organization I was freelancing for, and then some others were needing to deal with a pivot to a completely digital world. And so if you've got a chorus or an orchestra, and you usually do 3 to 4 performances a year for an in-person audience, and then all of a sudden the thing that you do becomes the most dangerous thing. So during the pandemic, this is also an interesting fact, I was singing in a chorus at the time. And so there was a COVID committee, and we were constantly looking at risk, reward, like, is it worth it? Is it not? And ended up not doing in-person rehearsals for a very long time, much longer than we all anticipated initially. But on the scale of most risky activities, singing was at the very top because of the amount of spit that comes out of a mouth when you're singing.
Yes.
It was absolutely
Yes.
the most dangerous thing you could do, sing in a choir, which,
Oh my gosh.
what? Singing in a choir was the most, like, that has never been who would
Oh
ever
my
think being a
gosh.
musician was like a dangerous job? And at that point it was. And so because of that,
Wow.
all these organizations had to figure out a way to still connect with their audience, provide the music and the artistry that those people needed, but also do it in a way that was safe for their own artists, and also not gathering 2, 3 to 1,000 people in a room for a big performance. So that's really where the big need came, and I saw that opportunity, and it gave me
Wow.
that little push that I needed to start the agency. So
Oh my gosh, Carissa, that's incredible. First of all, kudos to you on many, many levels, but also I didn't realize that. And when you talk about it, yeah, singing next to people, right? I mean, terrifying.
yeah,
You can't be doing that always with a mask and those kind of things. But we've heard some crazy stories with choirs during that time period, and it was really
yeah,
traumatic. But like you were saying, I think, and I was just talking to an entertainment friend of mine where I'm like, God, you provide entertainment. Like, we need that. There has been
yeah,
a lot of real hard times during that. 2020 was really hard. 2021 was harder. 2022 got harder. 2023 right now, I feel like a lot of us are just kind of opening up, going, oh my God, thank God, like, we're getting through a lot of this. And when I look back, I couldn't even imagine not having entertainment, not having music, not having things like that. And I was still watching, virtual choirs, virtual singing, because there was all these unique ways that people were pivoting. And that was, I think, some of the golden
hmm,
like lining through all of that was like, we still stayed true and like really kept going. But I mean, with your business being able to say like, oh wait, like, people need this for sanity. And again, we sometimes we don't even realize, like, listening to music is beautiful. For my mental health and well-being, I lean on that. There's so many different ways, but also just in the arts, how important the arts are. And I know that that's been a really tough journey for a lot of nonprofit arts organizations in the last few years, like you said, because they're not in the emergency, they're not, right in the cutting edge, but they're
hmm,
still needed, right? And there's a lot of different ways that they have to then pivot. But I also am curious, because in the nonprofit and with Right Relations, like you, when we were talking too, like, pivoting is a big thing and being flexible, but at the same
mm,
time, every single dollar counts. Like that,
yes,
when I work in corporate America, I mean, corporations, not just corporate America, but
yeah,
but corporations. And, we think about that. But when I've been on a board for nonprofits, I mean, it
hmm,
was insane how we at the board level was like, you're going to
hmm,
spend $13.50 for what, instead of, it's like,
yeah,
sometimes in corporations we're like 13,000, we're going to get this going, or 30,000 or 350,000, on a nonprofit level. That is something that's also that what I was hearing you say, like, there's that discrepancy as well, that kind of,
mm,
that difference, right? There's a lot of
yeah,
similarities between, I think, for-profit and non-for-profit. Everyone needs to make money. We all need to be able to bring in funding to do better. Even if it's on the
hmm,
for-profit side, we're producing products or services that want to do better, but nonprofit, those products, services, those purposes to do better.
yeah,
But at the same time, funding is so huge, right? I mean, am I
yeah,
getting that right, Carissa? Like, walk us through that, like, from that kind of
yeah.
funding standpoint, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, it's very different. Profit and nonprofit are two completely different worlds, and you can't really approach one with strategies that work for the other because they don't talk a lot. Profit, there
Ah,
is a lot more money. So when I left the nonprofit sector and went into marketing for a profit company, the amount of money, it was, I think times 10 was the budget that we jumped from. And so being able to have the opportunity to do, TV commercials, radio spots, and print, and then a whole digital strategy on top of, the normal, more grassroots marketing, which is really the core of a lot of organizations. Before they do any sort of paid marketing, they may already be doing a lot of grassroots marketing as well. So grassroots is a lot more important for nonprofits, purely because, exactly like you said, every dollar counts. And when you've got a board that you report to, you've got to make sure that you've accounted for every single dollar. There's not a lot of fun money. So right in the profit sector, there's a lot of that fun money where you can try something new and say, we can spend, depending on the corporation or company and how big the business is. Some smaller businesses may not have as much liquidity and the amount of fun money that they have. So they may be a little bit more similar to the nonprofit sector when we talk about smaller budgets. But yes, corporate is a very different ballgame for sure. $100,000 to $200,000, trying it out campaigns is just not an option in the nonprofit sector, primarily because there is a need for transparency in the nonprofit sector. And so what that means is if you were to spend, so say you have a $500,000 a year operating budget. So that's just your operating budget. That is to cover the cost of your admin fees, your all subcontractors that you may pay. So that would be, right relations or any other marketing or other service. So all of that has to be underneath that operating. And then you also have to pay for your programs, right? So whatever the service is that you're providing, you also have to cover that. And so when we start to think through, okay, well, if $50,000 of that, $500,000, that's 10% of the budget. That's a lot. That's a big chunk. And so when you start to think about it in terms of graphs, right? As a millennial, I am known for being, we are known for being values-driven people. And so I look for transparency. If I'm going to donate to an organization, I want to know exactly where that money's going. And so I look on websites and go to their spending allocation graphs, and I look at, if it's their annual report or whatever their sort of reporting system is. But I look at that graph, and if you think about it, so 10% of a circle is a lot. And so if you're looking at that as a donor and thinking, okay, that's a lot of money for them to just spend on marketing. Why aren't they spending more on the other 90% that is keeping the organization running? And I think that that's something that a lot of organizations think through and are really hesitant to spend the money that they need to spend on marketing and development, because they think, oh my gosh, our donors are going to look, or our board is going to look at these and not understand the value. And that's the hardest sell, is talking with an executive director about their goals and saying, you'd have to spend some money to get money, right? And so that's a big switch in a mindset, but it's also thinking through the fact that $1,000 does matter and every dollar counts. And so that's where coming in and making negotiations with media buys, saving money, right? So if you're spending $50,000 on ads, and then I come in and Right Relations comes in and we're able to negotiate down some of your contracts, and you save $15,000 to $20,000. It's not always the case, obviously, and it depends on the situation and how well versed the existing director is or staff member that's dealing with the media buys. But there is that situation, and that has happened. There has been clients that I have worked with where we have gotten double the amount of advertising for the same amount of money. So
that's incredible. That's comes from the experience and the expertise, where you guys know where to put it, right? Because you were saying, experimenting is non-existent. You don't have time to then redo the marketing campaign for the upcoming shows or the upcoming gala or the events, or even if it's just funding, where you're hey, we need to get brand awareness and get things out there. That I love what you're saying too, because it's one of those where it is worth the investment. And I do believe, like you said, your clients, they know it, right? And Charissa, talk to us too, because I feel like it's really difficult to navigate the nonprofit at times, like you were saying. It's very different than the corporations, than businesses that are for profit. There are similarities. I love when you were talking about like they don't talk to each other. I'm like, let me tell you, on the other side, people don't talk to each other either. But it sounds like it's even more disconnected. There's even more silos. Like there's not a lot of cross-functional talking and communicating on both sides. But when we talk about the differences, it really does come down to, like you said, they don't have any fund money, and they really need, not that a lot of companies would say, we have a ton of fund money, but they would say, maybe they get a little breathing room with an experiment that goes wrong, or they get opportunities to try different things, where I think what I'm hearing from you is nonprofits, like one of the biggest challenges is they've got to get it right on the first time. And if they don't hit that, they don't hit their numbers, they miss the mark, and, people don't see them, or they don't get to that next level with their mission and their purpose. And I think that's also something that I've witnessed, where a lot of nonprofits that I've seen that can grow and scale, but miss the mark sometimes. And they'll go back like 10 steps, not just 2 steps, in their business. And everything starts to get cut, and it's just a very tumultuous environment. And I feel like that as the leaders in nonprofits, you feel like, they have a huge job, and there's a lot of stress, in leadership anyways. But, just getting to know some folks from nonprofits, like I feel like their stress levels are out the roof, because like you said, they have to validate, they have to be transparent. They have to be able to say, this is why I did this. And, there's no, like, I can blame anybody else. Like, no, this is it. And I feel like, there's also been a bunch, you and I have talked about, like, trying to find, like, I feel like with right relations, some of the superpower is that you're not just in marketing. I mean, look, you are an artist yourself. I don't know if everyone knows, but you're also an opera singer. You are, you graduated with speech and speaking, and just being able to do all of that. But your past brings in a lot of expertise, understanding where they come from. And then also knowing that you wear multiple hats. So they're not just like, I've seen a lot of nonprofits where they get like, here's a marketing person that does this, here's a person that does this. And in fact, you need someone who's a little bit more versatile for more bang for your buck. If that's, am I wrong? Like, what do you think? Like, is that, am I on the mark? Because I feel like maybe it would be hard for people to understand, how do I utilize you? Where do I put you, Charissa? And like, how do I justify that to the board,
Yeah, no, for sure. I think, so really, when we talk through kind of the target market and the clients that we have, so if I'm to look at the current Right Relations client book, it's all medium to small, either nonprofits or small businesses. So primarily, we are working with nonprofits in the performance arts space. That being said, like I said earlier, smaller businesses with smaller budgets, there is a bit of crossover when we talk through some strategies that might work for a nonprofit that are a little bit more grassroots or are just a lower spend. Those transfer really well over to small businesses as well. So when we talk through kind of our current client base, that is it. We are looking at the small to medium size. I say that because the large nonprofits, so if we were to talk about, if I was to work for the Met, or the San Francisco Symphony, or there's a bunch of them, the BSO, the Boston Symphony Orchestra, they don't need me. They don't need a Right Relations, because they already have a team of 5 to 10 to 15 internal marketers. So that's the big kind of distinguishing factor between kind of what Right Relations does, is we're not looking to work with those big guys, because they are filled up with a bunch of generalists as well, which is very much what I would consider myself to be, and the staff that work for me as well. And so it's important to be well-rounded as a marketing professional in the nonprofit sector, because when we talk about that small to medium size orgs, they need someone that can do a little bit of PR, that can help them, edit or write or create and distribute a press release, but then also turn around and talk to the board about some upcoming marketing campaign opportunities, or the ad buys that they should do for that next season. And so it's a lot. There's a huge variety of services that Right Relations provides. And the big selling point that I tell every single client, obviously before they're a client, But then also after is that at the end of the day, they want to be able to have a person that they can call on the other that's
Exactly.
going to answer their call. And
I
so
get you.
if they've got an emergency, if something comes up that they know, like, okay, let's go strategize with Right Relations. Let's sit down and have a call with them. Let's talk through let's think about this a different way. One of my clients, a majority of the contract with her is just a monthly brainstorming call. So she's not one of my biggest
Oh,
clients by any means, and it is very much a smaller org. So she's a staff of one. She has a board that she reports to, and then she's got a few other subcontractors that do some part-time work for her, but she's the only full-time staff member. So quite small, very small
wow, like
organization.
small but mighty
Very,
team. Like very
very small,
most
very
like, oh
mighty.
my
Yeah,
gosh. That's
yeah,
so yeah. Yeah, yeah,
yeah. And
yeah.
so exactly. And so she's on the front lines all by herself every single day. And so once a month
Yeah.
we hop on a call, and it's a 2+ hour long call. We just sit there and she just tells me everything she's got going on. We strategize about upcoming opportunities, campaigns, lead generation, marketing, a ton of different things. But for her, it is just peace of mind that she knows that at the end of every single month, she's going to have a call. She's going to sit down and
Wow.
she's going to run her ideas by me. And then she can go back to the board and say, well, Right Relations and I came up with this idea and this is what we're thinking. And it gives
Oh my
her that
gosh.
backing that she wants. And then it also just gives her that peace of mind to know, like, okay, somebody has
Yes.
listened to my idea and I'm not crazy. This is a good idea. And so,
Outside expertise,
exactly.
right? Like everybody, I know, I
Yeah.
love that where we're like, it's so funny because it's like everyone's like, it's an inside job. And then when you get into a company, they're like, we need
Mm.
outside support and, and then validate and you get
Yeah.
permission. It's amazing how priceless that is. I do that all the time. I see that all the time on both sides. But
Yeah.
Carissa, there's also that gem where it's not complicated. Like it's not, it can be very quick, 1 to 2 hour conversation, and then you're providing immediate next steps. And I think a
Yep.
lot of people underestimate, there's a lot of people in the nonprofit that I've worked with, they're always looking out, right? Like we're looking out the
Mhm.
next year, the next, 6 months, what are we going to do? And there's a lot of fear, right? And a lot of doubt
Yeah.
because it's constantly changing. You've got to keep going. I totally hear that. At the same time, sometimes the best route, which I have noticed, is what are we doing tomorrow? How are
Mhm.
we? And if we can have clarity of like, okay, here's the next month, like you were saying, here's what you did, current history, here's your past month, here's where you're going. Let's pivot, right course, get things back on track here. But you're saying like, here's what you can start to do in the next 30 days.
Yeah.
That's priceless. I mean, that's
Yeah.
priceless to any team, but especially what I'm hearing from a nonprofit, a small but mighty team with 1 to 5, maybe 10 people tops, that are
Yeah.
really running the show, that's, oh my God. I mean, that is literally
Yeah.
priceless. That's invaluable because now you're
Yeah.
saying, I'm getting expertise, I'm getting the brainstorming, I'm getting the right actions, and I can put my money, I can place my bets more confidently,
Exactly.
in where I'm
Yeah.
going to go. Okay.
A-
That's
yeah,
fantastic.
a lot of the organizations I work with don't have a year plan. They don't have a marketing plan. They don't know what that is because why would they? They're not marketers,
Yeah.
right? So they're executive directors of nonprofits. Their job, a big part of their job is to work on the development of the organization. So their really primary focus is not only, doing what that nonprofit was created to do, so that providing the service, if it's, performances, making sure the artistic staff has what they need and dealing with all the logistics. They're not only doing that, but they're also, most of the time, they're also dealing with the development as well. And so when we talk about development, that's mostly a nonprofit term for fundraising, right? And so they're responsible
Yeah.
for donor engagement, making sure that those top donors feel valued and treasured by that organization so that way they continue to invest into the org overall. And so they're busy with all of that. And that is a very common reason why organizations reach out to Right Relations, is just you've got an executive director that is, like you said earlier, beyond stressed. They're at their wits' end and need help. They need someone to help manage
Yeah.
because not only is there paid marketing, right? There's organic. We start to talk about social media. Then you've got,
Absolutely.
SEO, you've got PR, which is a whole different basket when we start to talk through
For
messaging and
sure.
branding and
We talk about marketing
having
materials. Do you
all of
have
it.
those nice letters for your VIPs?
Exactly.
Like, it's a long, long list.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, that adds
So
up quick.
yeah, so they're just they're overwhelmed, and that's really
Yeah.
where right relations comes in. Is just like trying to sit down and have conversations and start to say, okay, if this is what's putting you over the edge, like if this idea that the board gave you to help engage a new audience, you have no idea how to make that happen. Let's strategize. Let's find some solutions. Let's put together a year plan for you. Let's put together a communication strategy, get you some nice, like, general boilerplate communications ready to go, things like that, that
Amazing.
they just, small orgs, small, medium sized orgs, a lot of times, sometimes they do, but most of the time they don't have a lot of that
Yeah.
set because they're dealing with the day to day for
You're
sure.
right, Carissa, because I do find like that's incredibly valuable. Like I'm a huge proponent of foundation. And like once you build that, you don't have to necessarily build it over and over again. It'll just work
Yeah.
from there. And what I'm hearing you say is like you can, you're like, hey, we come in and like let's do this assessment. Let's get this foundation done once and then get you guys going on track. But like you're also
Yeah.
saying there's so many plates in the air and there's so much stress and there's so many like nuances. They do need an advocate like yourself, like, right? Like they do need, like, I need an advocate like that. And I don't even know how nonprofits do it sometimes, without that, where they're just kind of just like taking a drink from a fire hydrant, Googling stuff. Like I know that they're like, we need support on privacy policies. And, like you said, for everything from ads to like, do we write the letters? Is it the VIP thing right now?
Yeah.
There's a lot to manage. And I feel like that's something that's really special that I'm hearing. And I'm really grateful Right Relations exists because I do feel like that is a key superpower that people really need, that outside advocate. And it doesn't have to be a full-time person. It doesn't have to be a heavy lift that you're talking about. It can really
Yeah.
just be something that's just like you said, a generalist that's really helping to guide and
Hmm.
making every decision count that much more. And that is
Yeah.
something, I mean, look, that is something as in organizations across the globe, teams want to be able to feel confident. But,
Hmm.
recently I just moderated an event with a bunch of nonprofits. And I have to say, like, the thing that kept coming back is exactly what you're saying, is that they have to focus on their mission. Their
Yeah.
volunteers, their employees, they're mission driven. And it's
Yeah.
more so than any other for-profit company. And I think that's really one of the differences. But if because of all this stuff, they tend to lose sight of that.
Yeah.
And then you get people that are really, like you said, bogged down. It feels like you bring energy, right? Like you're bringing enthusiasm. Like this is fun. Like I feel like nonprofits should be like, they're the rock stars. They're out there crushing it. They're making the world a better place. They're doing
Yeah.
it.
Oh
They're
yeah.
hitting the ground running every day. They do it. Like you said, their budgets are so much lower. And yet
Yeah.
people are so much more passionate about their jobs and about being of service that, and I find that that's their magic. And it's just,
Hmm.
everyone wants to participate and they want to, you want that to be magnanimous where you're like, oh my
Totally.
goodness, like I'm attracted to that. And every nonprofit wants that energy out. And in order to do that, I feel like what you're saying is too, it's like, what is the messaging? What is what you guys are putting out there and how are you doing it? And then allowing yourselves to have that advocacy, that support, from companies like Right Relation. I think
Yeah.
that's really amazing. Oh
Yeah.
my
Purpose.
goodness.
Yeah. Purpose driven people are so incredible to work with because it's just it I am one, right? So you've mentioned that I'm a performer. Yes,
Yes.
I have a degree in vocal performance. So I'm a classical musician, or an opera singer, as some people would say. And I love it. It's something that I've done my entire life. Like I started in a choir when I was 5, and I didn't stop until the pandemic hit. That was the first break I'd ever had. And so, because I love it, I love singing
Oh,
in community with other people. It just brings me so much joy. And so, because of that deep love, I always knew I wanted music and the arts in my career in some way. Initially, I thought I wanted to be a full-time performing artist, but realized very quickly that I was really passionate about singing, but my classmates were more passionate about it than I was. And so I realized in my first week of school that I knew I wanted to do something with communications as well, and that's the 2 degrees that I have. So the communications marketing degree and then this
wow.
the vocal performance degree. Together, they make up the core of really Right Relations, and the reason why I started it in the first place is because I want musicians who oftentimes are executive directors, because we are, as musicians, we're very good at starting organizations to create more music. And so That's a wonderful thing and a superpower for sure to be, especially when we talk about the small to medium size. Those orgs generally are made up of artists and musicians themselves. And so when you start to talk to someone about the mission, and the mission is their passion because it fills them with joy, then we start talking about music, then 10 minutes goes by and we got to get to the meat of the conversation because we can't talk about choral music all the time or whatever it is that we're talking about. And I think that's really the core, is that me and then also my employees. So I've hired someone as well, so I'm expanding, which is really exciting. And her background is in theater, so she's got 2 degrees as well. She has a degree in from a conservatory on the theater side, and then she also has a degree in writing and English. And so when we talk through who's the best to write about a theater program, would then a copywriter who also knows the theater like the back of her hand, right?
Exactly.
And so that's a big comment. Yeah, I hear back from clients is just that we get it. We understand. They don't have to explain to me how a choir works. They don't need to understand the difference. They don't need to explain to me the difference between, this type of music and this composer when we're talking through which image would make the most sense to go with that piece or that work, right? That you're trying to get people to attend that concert. So that's just one of the very niche examples I can kind of give to explain exactly why I love working with passion-driven people, because there's just something, you just get it, right? You get other people who are passionate about what they're doing and want the world to experience what they love so much.
Yes, Charissa, it's coming off. Like you are one of the most passion-driven people that I know, and that's why I feel like you and I connect, and we can have these conversations for hours, because, I feel like that is your energy and that is your enthusiasm. But also, I mean, kudos to you for making a bold choice. Like, I know you and I have talked about that too. Like in my past, like I've had to make sharp, hard lefts that I thought I was going straight on a path, right? Like you were saying, like you were going to be a singer, but then that's a bold move. And also that inner wisdom coming out, like, really showing that intuition. I mean, look, I do this a lot, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like good for you for noticing and picking up on those internal signs, especially when you saw everyone else loving it more, even though you love it. There's something to be said about the fact that the world is better because you're doing what you're doing, right? Like you have so many clients that I know would be lost. And we've had so many of those conversations as well, of like, even when we're talking today, those are key moments that you've been able to help direct and get just a little bit further or really far, in the direction that these clients, these nonprofits are going. And that is priceless, because you, like you said, you are them. You've done that. You've worked on both sides. You are a musician. You understand where their passion is and where they're coming from, and that they don't want to be doing this, right? Like, no, like sometimes, like, I mean, I think this stuff is sexy, but like a lot of people don't. Like, there's like, this is not my gig. Like, they just want to be out there. They, like you said, they want to be bringing more of the music to the world, more of the arts, more of the culture, that you was going all the way back to the beginning, saying, it really does count for our sanity, for mental health, for our awareness, for our serenity. Like so many nonprofits, you've really shifted my perspective on that. And thank you, because I was like thinking back and I'm like, oh my gosh, like those are the moments that kept me grounded and that made me feel, really connected. We talk about that a lot, especially with the arts being, maybe it's not like, the emergency, but at the same time, it does make balance, right? Like it does help us bring those together. And I just think, that's why it's like, okay, I love what you're doing, because it's just like, how can I be a bigger advocate for the folks that really need that advocacy, right? That really need that support. Because if you're a breath of fresh air every month or every day for your clients and every week, however often they want to connect, that is priceless, because in that moment, they can leave that call, they can get off that meeting, and they can go forward feeling a little bit better. They're not alone. They know somebody that knows what they're talking about. It's not like, because a lot of marketing agencies are not musicians. Like that's, a lot of people don't like have that perspective. And I think that that's one of the beautiful things, honestly, Charissa, that makes you guys so unique. And the fact that when you're scaling, you're really being thoughtful about that. And I think that's really helpful, even for anyone who's listening, who has their own business. It's like, well, who are my audience, right? Like, who's my audience? Like not just their audience, but who's my audience? Who are the leaders and the change makers that I'm working with? And then who am I hiring and bringing in that are going to be a really great fit for them, right? That are going to be able to talk to them, equally and on their level, and have a bit of understanding, of who they are. And so I think that in this situation, that is like gold, And so I'm just, oh my gosh, Charissa, you are amazing. I am so grateful. Thank you so much for sharing. And honestly, so much to the fact that you are really scaling and bringing this to life during a pandemic, seeing the gap, seeing the discrepancy. I can only see anyone out there that has a story that was like, I'm thinking like Charissa, do it, go for it. Take that risk, it's worth it. I do feel like when we are aligned with our passion that, things just start showing up, more gets revealed and people start supporting, they come out of the woodwork. You're like, how did that happen? And like you said, and you found those gaps and it's like, oh my gosh, here I am today. And now we're scaling and growing. Right. And it's 100%. Like day to day though. And I feel like you're using and applying the same techniques that you're working with your clients with your own company. And that is where I also find this, it's like the symphony, the harmony, not to go into the music, but like, you
I love it.
Synthesizing that into a beautiful, harmonic, ballad that is right relations, but also, bringing that together with your clients. I just think it's beautiful, Charissa. Thank you so much. And I would like to ask you just a couple of quick questions. I do this at the end, for my hello wrap up. And these are just simple questions, but they can be a little bit putting. So like, I'm just going to give you some seconds to do it. But, the first one is, what does fulfillment mean to you? And I know that is something that, like with Let It Begin With Me, this podcast, it's really about us talking about people in their journeys, right? Like you're having daily successes, but you're also having daily challenges and, dare I say, barriers or ways that are like, hey, I need my audience to hear me better, these kind of challenges that are out there. But, we talk a lot about fulfillment. And that's what I heard a lot from you today is like, you're really fulfilled in what you're doing now, right? That's not the Charissa from 2019. This is the Charissa of 2023. Yeah. And so what does that mean to you? What does fulfillment mean to you?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say for me, fulfillment, and like if I was to get to the end of my life and look back, what if there was one thing that I would want, it would be, ironically, to have lived, a purpose-driven life. So I know that's so broad and it doesn't really make, it sounds like a cop-out, but when I was the kid that cried every birthday when it was the night before my birthday because I didn't want to grow up. I wanted to be Peter Pan.
Oh my gosh.
And I was I loved being a kid. I loved life and I wanted it to last forever. And so I didn't like the reality of aging. So I was like the 6 and 7-year-old, like sitting there with like tears in my eyes to myself, like, I don't want to grow up. I want to be a kid forever. And so I think as I become an adult, obviously I'm not a child anymore. My big driver is just, I would hate to look back on my life and think, oh, I just kind of lived an average life. Like I wasted time. And so that's really important to me and is really kind of essential to my ethos every single day is like, am I in alignment with my purpose? Am I doing what I need to be doing in order to feel fulfilled? And so that's a question I ask myself a lot. And it has led me to these big, outlandish decisions, like starting a business in the middle of a pandemic. And my husband had, bless his heart, asked me, are you sure you want to do this? Like, do you feel confident? And he only ever asked me once. And I said, yes, I feel like this is what I need to do. And he said, go for it. And so I think that, just like, yeah. And I think that just speaks so highly to the type of life that I want. Right. And so I try to not think of myself as ever being there because you're constantly growing and learning. But yeah, living a purpose-driven life, is really, really important to me.
Carissa, that is beautiful and well put. And I was going to give you a hard time because you were like, I know it's broad stroke, but then, that is a really beautiful story too. But I also love that passion with the inner child, never losing that and just kind of bringing that. Carissa, that is so who you are. But I also feel like, that the fact that you live that daily and that you're doing that for yourself, it makes perfect sense why Right Relations does that, right? Like, so that I always tell people that if you found who's the founder of the company, who's the owner, that's the energy and the drive that is coming through their business. And it's really beautiful that fulfillment is actually your mission passion for Right Relations. And, it's coming through. So I think thank you for that. And then I always ask this is my if I had a magic wand, I always ask this question on every one of my interviews. If I could wave a magic wand and change one thing in your day that would make it more rewarding, what would it be for you?
Probably decreasing the amount of time that I spend wasting. So
really?
Social media, scrolling. Sometimes that's how I detach from stress, right? Is that we all have our little escapes. And as much as I feel like I need it in the moment, I think I hate doom scrolling because I hate the moment that you stop and then you realize what time it is and how much time you've wasted, 15, 25, an hour, it can happen. And I would say
it's a real thing.
Not wasting time. I love to be productive. I'm a very productive person. And I think if I was going to spend my time relaxing, I try to be more intentional about how I do that, like going to a yoga class or intentionally meditating or, whatever it might be. That I hate spending and wasting time, but it happens because phones suck us in. So
I know. I love this answer because I've never heard it. And I'm absolutely blown away because again, you've been shifting my perspective a lot through this. And that one is holy cow. There's a moment where it's good, right? Because I'm I'm detaching, I'm taking a mental break. I'm just kind of stepping away from everything. And then there's the moment where I'm oh my goodness, you're right. 30 minutes, an hour, maybe longer has gone through and you're holy cow. It's and I do find that that's brilliant because I do think bringing that up too is also talking about, we find balance and it's messy, right? So we're still we're still working on, like you said, yoga, meditation, trust me. I know what to do and I still don't do it sometimes where I'm just nope, I'm going to get lost going down some sort of funky pipeline in the internet where I'm just how did I end up here? And I think, that's really well said, less waste of time. And I'll work on that for you because I'm the magic wand. I'm that's brilliant. I was and it would make me feel more rewarding. I really like that one. Thanks, Carissa. Because I do feel I wonder how many people out there are oh yeah, how many minutes, how many moments of the day where that's not bad, but when it turns to the negative and then you're oh yeah, I've lost some time and I could really be using that time, So that's brilliant. Carissa, thank you so much. I am so appreciative, beyond grateful for your time and just your presence and being an advocate out there for me. That just gives me more drive and enthusiasm. And honestly, you've energized my day. And like I just recently said, you've shifted my perspective in multiple ways. And I just find that once I have new information, it's good for me to change my mind and okay, now I'm going to start looking at certain things in a different way. But, for all of you guys out there, I just feel if you're in that position, if you're a non-for-profit and you're in a position where you have a small or any team, oh my gosh, reach out to you, Carissa, reach out. You can go to therightrelations.com. I know you do a report. Oh my God, wait, it's called the Right Report. Is it the
Right Now Report?
The Right Now Report. Thank you, Carissa. And I'm going to tell you, I have been using it and sending that to my for-profit clients, just so you know, because Carissa puts this amazing report out monthly that's here's all the hot stuff that's going on, anywhere from AI to social media to whatever is here's what's going on right now. And I got to tell you guys, go and sign up for this. This is brilliant. I get it. I love it. I'm so grateful because I don't have to synthesize that. So Carissa, and it's beautifully put and it's well written. So kudos. I'm very, very grateful. Again, go to therighrelations.com, sign up for this, talk to Carissa. Carissa, we're a huge fan of you, big advocate, and just sending lots of good thoughts ahead to the rest of your day. And we will stay connected. Thank you.
Thank you so much.